Down it, down it, down it, down it,
And I agree completely, basically, with everything that you've said.
down it, down it, down.
I was thinking about whether or not I'm just being picky. You don't really have much at your disposal. I did not understand how that works. You just back the fuck away. Blah.
Hello again. This week we're talking about American McGee's Alice, which we recently played, which was released, when was it released? 97? 2001. So I completed it. How far did you get, Aleks?
Unfortunately, I think I got up to about 50% mark. I am right before you get into the world where the floor is the checkboard, like the chessboard.
Right before that bit.
I think I'm literally where you jump in the teleport to get there.
Oh man.
So is it about 50%?
It's probably around that. What were your thoughts then?
As I was playing it, I kept thinking that probably this was how you felt when you played The Witcher 1. Because of how clunky the combat was. However, I think that the game suffers the same thing that Max Payne suffers from, which is a slow start. I looked up some of the gameplay from further down the line, and I think that the game seems like it becomes more entertaining. I have more discussion topics, but I think I'll start here for the general view, and I'll let you go.
I feel like I know what you're going to say about it, especially for someone who's played a lot of From Software games. Really specifically the combat. I think, first of all, what's probably important to remember about Alice is that it came out on the Quake 3 engine by American McGee, who was a level designer for Doom 2, Quake. And he wanted to create something quite different from what was happening at the time with shooters, which you can really tell. And, you know, it was quite revolutionary, really, in terms of its art style, in terms of its presentation, because he really wanted to get away from that idea of brown space marines and, you know, guns and lasers, right? And go for something quirky. It's still kind of odd that it's still got, because it's made at that same time, it's not breaking like massive new ground in terms of gameplay, but in terms of its presentation and its visual art style, it's pretty unique. Like, it looked really good at the time. It looked really good as well, and the concept art for it is amazing. It's kind of like in the same way Fable is, I guess, like something quite fresh. And so it's got this great atmosphere, and it's really new. I think my major gripe, though, was with the combat specifically, mostly because I didn't understand it. So mostly because I didn't understand what was going on, like as in what the enemies were telegraphing, and how to counter attacks. Like, that was a big one, right? Like, it just seemed quite random, right? There was no, but you also have to put this in the context of like 2001 as well, and like we've said before in quite a few other videos, in that sort of similar era, that people just saved all the time, right? We've said this before in like Thief, Gold, in Max Payne as well. You save all the time, and that's sort of, you save at a point when you've got like good health and good ammo, resources, whatever, and then you reload if you need to. So I kind of had to put my mind in that sort of context, in that sort of setting, for me to sort of get it a bit more. But yeah, that was my biggest gripe was really just first, like, understanding, like, what's the attack pattern of the enemies, like, what, like, it just seems random, and like, how are you supposed to counter or dodge or block anything? And if there isn't, like, it's fine if there doesn't have to be a block, doesn't have to be a dodge, but there's got to be some way of mitigating damage, right?
Yeah, there's got to be a cadence to the fight.
Yeah, there has to be something that otherwise it's not even a case of who shoots first, right? Because the weapons are kind of slow, really, you know. So a lot of the combat for me was just like breaking line of sight all the time with the enemies and run around. And I also forgot that like circle strafing was absolutely a thing in those days, which you found out to good effect in Thief. People talk about circle strafing in terms of bosses normally, but we don't normally talk about it in terms of just like, and this is an old sort of technique, right? But not in terms of like normal enemies. Man, there was a boss near the end. Oh my god, Jesus! Oh man, that was painful. It was so painful that I had to use a cheat. Like,
Oh, wow.
I had to use a cheat, and because all of the guides as well, well, not all of them, but half of them were just about cheesing it, right? So they're just like, oh, you can sort of stand in this certain spot here, and he won't be able to attack you. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just a cheese. It's not like that's not really how you're supposed to play the game, right? So it would feel like cheating anyway, doing that. And I tried doing that, by the way, that cheese, and it didn't really work. Anyway, that was my initial take on at least the combat. But the world itself is amazing. And it actually has some pretty strong themes in it as well, like some pretty good, interesting themes.
Yeah, so I guess let's finish talking about combat first. And I agree completely, basically, with everything that you've said. And I think that my biggest problem was exactly as you described, the fact that there isn't really any sort of cadence to the combat with most of the enemies, especially in the beginning, because the soldiers that you fight in the first world, if you are within their range, you can't do anything. You are getting hit. And so my combat was essentially throwing knives from the distance, wait for it to recharge, throw it again. That was by far most of my combat was like that.
Well, and you found that effect because the knife's like the one you use when you don't have any mana, right? Because that's the weakest weapon.
It's weak. Don't get me wrong. It is weak, but because it's free to throw, doesn't consume mana, recharges on its own, it's consistent. Everything else I felt like was just way too draining on the mana. Like the cards. The cards were super effective, but you spend more mana to kill the enemy than you then regain from the enemy.
Yeah.
So it just felt like...
Yeah, that was a weird... Yeah, sometimes a weird trade-off, right? And actually, I was thinking about that recently because a lot of people talked about when Doom 2016 came out, a lot of people were talking about this revolutionary mechanic of, like, push forward. And it was, right, for the time, of, like, when you kill an enemy, you get health from them, right? And then I was playing Alice, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot they did this in 2001, basically, right? They actually did this with Alice, right? Which was reasonably unique for the time. Before that, we at the time we were like picking up health packs, right? Like Doom did it, Quake picking up health packs, and then we sort of moved on to recharging health, right? Like duck down and recharge health, and then games like Doom 2016 came out, and so like that does feel pretty. It feels kind of revolutionary and interesting. They always drop health and mana.
Yeah.
Every time you kill something.
Yeah. Which is super helpful because otherwise, I don't know really what you do in that game.
I don't know because that's the thing. There were random health pickups, but you wouldn't see them very often.
I know. No. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking about whether or not I'm just being picky, whether or not I'm just being unfair, whether or not I'm sort of expecting something from the game that maybe couldn't have been done because of the tech at the time. However, it took me the whole of 5 minutes of thinking this through. Let's say you take the same enemies, you slow them down, their attack patterns, by like 15% at most, and you make the hitboxes a bit consistent with regards to, let's say, sudden attacks, you strafe, sudden attacks, you jump over, sudden attacks, you just back the fuck away.
Yeah, but this is one of the problem. This was the other problem I wanted to bring up actually about, like, especially in the bosses. The problem is, at least like the big sort of high level problem, is that as a player, you want to know why you failed, right? You want to
Yeah.
know what you did wrong and know that you did something wrong that
Yeah.
made you fail that combat encounter. And when people get frustrated, it's because they don't know why they failed. They have no idea. And it keeps happening over and over again. You're like, I don't know why. What? like, like, just random stuff happened. Okay, like, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, whatever. It's a pretty hard game, frustrating game. Like, I mean, I'm not very good at it anyway. I'm not really that interested in those games. But, like, at least I know why I failed, right? So I know why something went wrong.
Yep. And especially because this game has difficulty levels.
Yeah.
But what can you personally do differently about
Yes.
enemy encounters if you don't really have much at your disposal?
Yeah, it's not like you're faster off the mark, right? When you play a higher difficulty level, and that makes a difference because it doesn't really make a difference. It's not like you're more accurate because most of the time the weapons are kind of auto lock on, which is another thing as well. Some of the weapons just didn't work, right? Like these, I don't know. Did you get the demon dice?
I was going to ask you about that because I did not understand how that works, and I tried a couple times.
So, yeah, you're supposed to throw them on the ground,
Yeah.
and then a little sort of window door of light pops up, and a random demon, depending on the roll of the dice, will come out, and it might be a little crappy demon, and they
Yeah.
basically hit enemies, but you have to throw them while enemies are around, because if you throw them when no enemies are around, they'll attack you because it's like the first thing they want to attack,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, but then sometimes you would throw them and just like, nah, nothing, you know.
That will happen to me.
You would just throw them and nothing would happen. And especially in boss fights, it would be like, nah. I mean, you're kind of like, okay, fair enough. They're like disallowed in boss fights. Fine, I guess. But no one tells you that, right? Nothing tells you it. You're just like wasting mana throwing stuff out, and it's like no. And there are other things that like they are part of the combat strategy, though, right? Especially when you have projectiles where you lock onto an enemy, you fire a projectile, but then it just hits like the wall below the enemy instead of actually hitting the enemy, because it's just going in a straight line, right? Beelining for it, and maybe the enemies move back or something like that slightly. So it feels bugged, but it's not really, it's just slightly frustrating. But it is like, again, it's like one of those things where I appreciate the effort they put into making really new stuff because it was getting tired, right? At that time, people were getting tired of like freaking rocket launchers and plasma rifles and chain guns, right? And having a crosshair, because like the crosshair is an interesting thing as well, just like a free floating mouse, which was slightly. I couldn't find the crosshair on screen, which is slightly annoying. And some weapons don't have a crosshair either, which is weird because of the way they work. But it was kind of cool that like it's almost like they were trying to make everything about the shooter genre different, which is cool. It's really cool, and it works for the art style for sure. But I'm not sure it really fully worked for the combat. you know.
I think that later down the line, some of the enemies were better at it. Some of the enemies you could actually consistently either strafe or sort of jump out the way. There was a bit of like dance that you would have with them, but not in the beginning, not in the early game.
That's right, because they're right at the end of the game. There are these card guys who fire projectiles at you and they explode, and they're like ice projectiles or explosive projectiles, and you can see them coming, right? So they fire it at you. You can see them coming. You can dodge out the way, and then you go like, and it's honestly, it's like those are the times when I felt much less frustrated because I knew it was coming at me. I knew like it was. I mean, it was a bit annoying because they had a force pushback on them, like they applied a physics force to you, and so they would sometimes knock you off a ledge because there's so much platforming in Alice, right? But at least I knew why I'd it was my own stupid fault for not getting out of the way, right? You know, like I wasn't paying attention to that, right? I wasn't looking around and paying attention.
Only a few find the way. Some don't recognize it when they do. Some don't ever want to.
And speaking of that, actually, platforming, right? Like, because platforming is like a big part of the game. I quite enjoyed the platforming. I thought it was quite good.
I really hated it. It took me. So first of all, actually, I'm right getting riled up. I'm trying to stop myself from just going blah. So first of all, the first boss fight, right, with this sort of old lady in a circular arena.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where you get the sort of the toy weapon.
The Jack in the Box. Yeah.
Thank you. So there are like healing packs that get spawned in that arena, but they are on ledges. So many times I would jump towards the healing pack and the Alice would go whoop and grab onto the ledge.
And it's like really slow for it to pull up. Yeah.
It's incredible, and I'm just getting wasted. Trying to like just get out of the way, just jump down or do something already. So many times I failed the boss fight.
The worst was like, well, I mean, worst for that maybe was maybe I'm thinking about it because I only did it yesterday. It was the last level where you can't, you've got to give her a little bit of time before you can jump again, right? Once she lands, which is quite standard anyway, right? For platforming in general. But it was just a bit like, because there's so many little ledges and you're running around in a circle and trying to pick up like health stuff while shooting at the boss. And there's so many times where it's like, you just didn't jump, did you? You just walked straight off the thing. But I actually did get a good cadence going with it, where I could basically just time it so I was kind of like slightly before the edge, and then it would have like a good cadence. And so that was actually okay. I didn't find that too bad. But I know what you mean sometimes with it, when you like, especially in like critical moments.
Yeah.
And sometimes when something happens and you're just like, what? Why? What?
The other problem that I had is that it took a YouTube video for me to figure out that you can climb up the vine.
Yeah. We had to look this up as well, because, and this might be a difference between the HD version or something. I don't know, but we had to look it up as well, and it's just like right mouse click to climb.
Why?
I guess it's one of those things where it's like people weren't doing that a lot in those days, right?
Yeah.
You know, like that's what happens, right?
I pressed all of the buttons, none of them worked. I thought I actually got stuck. There was a section where...
I know the bit you're talking about, I think, because I probably got stuck at the same place.
Come closer, my little chick. Properly seasoned, you'd make a handsome dish.
I'm not edible.
Not a full meal, certainly, but a light snack, I think.
I'll have the turtle shell now, you disgusting ogre.
Over my dead body.
I'll try to accommodate you.
So let's circle back to boss. I only did 2 boss fights. The first one with the witch, and that was incredibly annoying because I kept dying, and I tried using all these weapons on her, and it felt like I was doing no damage. And then I used the Jack-in-Box, and I killed her in like 4 hits. And I was like, what? The second one was,
This is where our experiences between The Witcher 1 and Alice collide, right? Because you remember I was saying the same thing about The Witcher. Yeah. And to be fair, The Witcher has that mechanic specifically, but then so does Alice. It's got like, there's like a weak point, specific weak points on those bosses, you know?
Yeah, the boss fight with the centipede I enjoyed.
Oh, you did do that? You see, so I was looking at that weak point on the centipede. Is it that? And then I thought it was, and then maybe it wasn't, and then I wasn't sure because, again, it wasn't like super clearly communicated that was the weak, you know, I think it's on the bottom of him.
Yeah, because when you hit it, it makes a special noise. You hear that it's in pain.
There's a lot of other noises going on at the same time, and I was like, was that it? Like, I think it might be. But also because of the way that, because there's no other indication of how far you are down the boss fight other than it's
Yeah.
been in, like, there's no health bar, right?
No health bar.
Which,
no nothing.
again, I think is something that I also appreciate because I like minimizing UI. And I also like the idea that it makes the boss fight more perilous when you don't know how far you've beaten the boss. When you're like, have I got like 22 more hits to do or 200? Like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. Which is kind of cool. And I guess a lot of boss fights before then, right, didn't have health bars either. So, or indications of that, or numbers, whatever, flying off, or phases or stages, right, where you would. I mean, these bosses do have phases actually. And usually, like maybe a couple of phases, some of them. At least the ones at the end do. So you can kind of tell, all right, I'm halfway there, whatever.
How did you
Well-
find the other boss fights?
So again, it was weird, like sort of like with you. The first one I did fine, no problem somehow. The second one, the centipede one, was the one where I just kept hitting him in the wrong place, and then thought I did, and then thought I didn't, and then the one after that I think is a Jabberwocky. Oh, it's the Mad Hatter. Sorry, yeah. Oh, and then they did this like the twins, whatever, and they were like not too bad. Like those were after the centipede, they weren't too bad. Reasonably challenging, but again, it's like it's just not knowing what's going on in the fight, right? That's what you gotta. That's the big problem I had, was like knowing what the hell's going on in this fight. This game, for as much as I love the art style and everything and how it looks, has probably the most frustrating boss fight I have ever encountered. And to be fair, I don't play a lot of boss fights. I don't complete a lot of games. I don't play a lot of From Software games, so
Is it the final boss?
no, it's not. It's not even the penultimate boss. Technically, it's the one before. It's the Jabberwocky
to us.
Part 2. You fight him again.
Right.
Jesus Christ. It was like the boss, you know, exactly all the stuff we were talking about before, right? About like understanding what you did wrong, understanding what the boss is doing, having some kind of mitigation against their attacks. Because he would just follow you around. Right? He would start breathing fire at you, but not like, I'm going to breathe fire and I'm going to breathe fire in this place and then in this place. And so you're like, okay, I know what he's going to do. I can, you know, and if I get caught out, it's my fault, whatever. He would just start breathing fire and then just turn around and follow you with his fire. And you weren't fast enough to run away from it either, right? So, or you weren't fast enough to move sideways either. Like, it's not like he had a slow turning circle or anything like that. So that was the one I was talking about where I had to use God mode. And so many people commented on it as well about how it was so different.
Oh man.
I'd really like to see, I haven't actually watched it yet, but I'd quite like to see someone play it on the nightmare mode, you know, or a speedrunner play it, because, whew, boy, that was painful.
Okay, looking forward to it. I'm gonna try and finish the game.
You are gonna try and finish it.
I'd like to try and finish it.
The funny thing is, like, you play From Software games, you like boss fights, right? But the problem is like the boss fights are super.
I like fair boss fights.
Yeah.
And as much as these games, meaning Dark Souls and Elden Ring, not all of the boss fights are fair. That's it. That's going to be a different podcast when I make you play Dark Souls 1.
Yeah. Maybe we
yeah.
should play Dark Souls at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like fair boss fights. Yeah, nothing's more frustrating when, like we talked about today, when the attacks are not clearly telegraphed or when you can't possibly avoid something. But anyway, what did you think of level design?
It's great. I think the level. The thing is, you've got to remember as well. American McGee came from that pedigree of like the Doom level designers, right? He was a pretty major player in it. I mean, they weren't a big company, right? They were the sort of the second generation of id designers, right? After Carmack and Romero and all of those guys. And he was a Doom 2, Quake level designer, and he took all of those skills with him and all of the stuff that obviously the people he hired were the people he appreciated their level design for, and I think the level design's pretty good.
I hated it.
For what it is, for the era, right?
Well, actually, maybe I didn't hate it completely, but the forest in particular, I felt like I'm just running around in circles. Everything looked the same. I didn't know you could climb up the vines. I was like, what, am I just fucked my save? Do I have to restart from wherever? Like, it wasn't good time for me at all.
Yeah, maybe they were one of the weaker ones, but in general, I found them interesting. They were doing a lot of interesting things.
Especially the point where you get the freeze ray weapon or whatever it's called, the stuff that freezes the enemies. because
Yeah.
it's a whole sequence with ice, and
Yeah.
the physics of that game, as you've mentioned yourself, was wonky in the good moments when enemies hit you and if you happen to be midair, you just go flying around across the room. But like jumping on ice was just so frustrating.
Oh yeah, the ice level one where you're sliding around.
Yeah, and because the weapon is on like almost like a pedestal in the middle of the abyss. You basically have to jump on it, and it's gonna crumble on you. So you have to jump on it, grab the weapon, and jump back. But because you're on ice, you can't control the character accurately. I just slid off so many times.
Oh man. I think what's more interesting about the level design for me is the way they've crafted what they've done with the whole trippy Alice narrative, right? And
Right.
like some of the later levels as well, like halls of mirrors and rooms upside down and moving walls and ceilings and floors and things like that, and effects, which like really especially for the time were pretty mesmerizing. Mesmerizing, I mean, like functionally, right? It was functionally good as well, because I think that's what Alice excels at, is the atmosphere also, as well as that like functional sort of level design.
I think I really liked the vibe and the atmosphere of the game. I thought this was quite cool. I remember as I was watching some of the first cutscenes of the game.
Stir up no trouble, stranger. The Red Queen's agents are ruthless.
I'm not afraid of her or her creatures. Never was, really. You should stand up to them.
Defiance is useless. While the Queen reigns, only death can release us from this misery.
Or her death, I suppose.
Meta-essence.
I was thinking that Alice is what every 15-year-old girl wants to be.
Edgy goth girl.
Yes. But it works.
It was that the marketing for it, because I remember when it came out and the marketing for it was like her with the dagger and everything, and it was like a total, this real like dark gothic spin on Aleks with this really cool artwork, and again it was so different and so interesting. I think it captured people's imaginations quite a lot.
So talk me through, because I haven't finished the game. Talk me through the story of the game, because I don't feel like I've picked up much on it, and I was trying to pay attention.
Well, essentially, like, it's a lot of I mean, I can't give you a detailed account, to be honest, but it's about her own psyche, right? It's her own. She's trapped in she's in a mental institute because, you know, her parents died in a house fire and it's sent her over the edge. And a lot of the stuff you encounter in the game is about her, like, her battling her own demons, which is the interesting part of it as well. I think the interesting themes of it is about her battling her own demons, about her battling against her own psyche, you know, about her facing up to fears. And so the enemies kind of represent her fears and the stuff she's had hidden deep down, and the loss and grief of her parents, that kind of stuff. So all that stuff is like, again, it's like super cool stuff that people don't, you know, again, it's like American McGee just trying to do something like totally different from like, you're a space marine on Mars and aliens have invaded, right? Like, you know, that's basically the story. Like, essentially, right? These bosses represent those parts of her psyche that she's trying to kind of liberate herself from. And there are spoilers, because there is a bit of a twist as well to it, but I'm not going to mention them. It's pretty cool. Like, thematically, it's kind of cool. It's kind of like, you might almost go to say, sort of adult, and I mean adult as in, it's, you know, you get to have a bit of a deeper level of thinking about those themes rather than just blow up some aliens. Like, if you read the story of Quake.
If you read the what, sorry?
The plot of Quake, right, the game. Because originally Quake was supposed to be like a completely different game. It was supposed to be like a whole big RPG with a guy with a hammer and stuff, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it ended up turning into... And then they spent so long making the engine that by the time they were like burnt out by it, and they're like, screw it, let's just make a first-person shooter. But yeah, The music is worth mentioning because that's
Yeah, the music is cool.
Chris Renner, who was the drummer of Nine Inch Nails, did all the music
Oh,
for
no
it.
way.
Yeah. Because you remember, like, Nine Inch Nails did the music for Quake, so American McGee was a big fan of Nine Inch Nails, and he was the one who apparently suggested that Nine Inch Nails do Quake's soundtrack. And so I think after that, like, American was probably kind of buddy with some of the guys from Nine Inch Nails. I imagine that's how it went down. And Chris Renner, I think he did the soundtrack for Doom 3 as well. I think, like he did the main title of Doom 3. You know that? Yeah, that one.
You reminded me of something that I was going to bring up. I think we're back to Team doing the voiceover.
You've gone quite mangy, Cat, but your grin's a comfort.
And you've picked up a bit of an attitude, still curious and willing to learn, I hope.
Wonderland's become quite strange. How is one to find her way?
As knowing where you're going is preferable to being lost, ask. Rabbit knows a thing or two, and I myself don't need a weather vane to tell which way the wind blows. Let your need guide your behavior.
For Alice,
For all the characters, I felt like it wasn't produced with actors.
Alice was not done by like one of the team.
I was certain of it, but maybe I'm wrong.
The Cheshire Cat is the guy from Scream who says, "Hello, Sydney,"
Okay.
like that guy. Because I didn't actually think that. I didn't think that, like, they didn't sound... I mean, there's maybe some of them... let's just have it. Like, we'll find out, right?
Because the first cutscene at the start that plays at the start of the game, as soon as I heard that, I felt like, okay, this is self-made. Not, something about how the lines were delivered made me feel like it was amateur.
No, it's like there's this Roger Jackson, the Cheshire Cat, Jerry and Monroe. It's on IMDb.
Okay.
I didn't think that, to be honest. I mean, there might be some in like the grunts, there's some of the enemies.
No, I was specifically thinking about the cutscenes, but if not, maybe, well, I'm wrong, obviously, then.
But you will be tested by a more wrenching anguish, Alice. There is worse to come. You and this Red Queen cannot both survive. You are two parts of the same...
But it was, I mean, it's been a bit of a classic, and they've been trying to like revive it. There was a sequel, obviously, as Madness Returns, because that's the one you have to use to play it, right? But it wasn't as well received as the original Alice. I think it was mostly criticized for being sort of style over substance, a little bit too much, and a bit of a bit of a departure from some of the gameplay of the original. But then, it had been 10 years. A lot of people talk nowadays, like a lot of people talk about Madness Returns rather than American McGee's Alice, depending on if you're of a certain age or whatever. But yeah, there was a sequel, another sequel that American McGee wanted to do, but he got to the point where he's pitching EA like last year.
Oh, wow.
But it fell through, so they weren't really interested.
One of the other things that didn't make sense to me is the placement of this superpower tonic. I'm not sure what's the diegetic name of it.
You mean the Rage?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they would place it.
Yeah.
And either when there are no enemies around, there was some point in the early hours of the game when it's sort of like in this weird room close to the ceiling. I pick it up and the cutscene plays, and then the cutscene over, and the rage is over.
So what was the point in that?
And I'm like,
It was I had the same thing. Did you ever eat the grasshopper?
No.
So there's this grasshopper power up. I don't know whether you got to that, whether it's in at the point you got to. Yeah, apparently it would have been. But it basically makes you super agile. You can jump you can run around really quickly and jump super high. And it's useful in certain scenarios. And there's one moment in there's a room in one of the last levels where it does actually make sense for you to have that. But I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean about the rage, because it was a bit ridiculous. You kind of like, you'd either already defeated all the enemies anyway, and then you were like, well, I've got the rage now. Now I have to run and find enemies to fight, like, really quickly. And then by the time you'd done that, it was like halfway gone, maybe done. Or like you say, you'd get stuck in something else, like you get stuck in another cutscene or something. You're like, well, what was the point in that? Yeah, it was kind of weird.
What's the narrative justification for having it?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I'm guessing. There are, like, obviously, there are tie-ins to the whole, like, potion drinking in the books, you know.
Right.
Potion to make you big, potion to make you small, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I didn't really pay attention to that. I mean, he hasn't made a lot since, right? He made obviously Alice Madness Returns. He made American McGee's Grimm, like an episodic thing about the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. Yeah, I mean, it's not as well known. I mean, like, his Alice is the most well known.
I really liked how, again, in the forest biome, because there are these rivers that you traverse on leaves, and I like how the leaf just sort of pivots and the character pivots with it when you're like turning around the river bends or you're going down the stream, but the leaf doesn't pivot, it sort of just stays up, it just sort of stays upright and slides down. That reminded me of the level in Thief where you need to free the head of the Hammerites, and there was a sequence where there's a river that you need to cross on like a piece of wood. It just had the exact same thing, the exact same physics behavior to it.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I thought that level was alright. Again, it's just like a lot of saving, making sure you got the jumps right and everything, and you had those annoying things that flew out of the water sometimes to kind of like kill you or knock you off something.
I tried really hard not to save after every encounter, but then I gave up.
There's also a secret weapon in the game. I'll say secret. It's kind of like an end weapon, but you can basically find it. It's just an end weapon, but you can find it earlier in the game. And I missed it the first time. It's a Blunderbuss, so it's just basically a...
Oh yeah, I heard about, because I looked up the wiki because I got stuck and needed a walkthrough, and I saw references to the Blunderbuss, but I haven't encountered it, I don't think.
You have to have full mana, and because it uses all your mana in one shot. You know, it's obviously very powerful. But I only used it at the end because I didn't pick it up until the end.
Well, where can you find it in the beginning?
So you find it in one of the place where they have like a lot of lava volcano stuff, and there's like Humpty Dumpty is sat on a wall and he's pointing to a brick or something, and you've got to touch the brick, I think, and then you can find it. No, something like that. Yeah, like it opens like a secret passageway. And the very, very last boss level, you can find it. And you even then, it doesn't really give it to you. It's on like a platform lower down. So when I was doing the Jabberwocky fight part 2, the one that was really frustrating, I didn't even have the Blunderbuss then, which would have helped me, but I didn't have it. It probably wouldn't have done it wouldn't have like helped me to defeat that boss super easy. It would have been hard, but...
Have you played the game when it came out, or around the time when
I did play it a bit, but I never completed it.
What did you think back then?
I mean, all the stuff that I said before about it, like, I don't remember thinking about the combat, right, much then. But what I do remember is that it looked really good. Like, it looked really different and interesting. It has a lot of character to it, right, which is what its intention is.
Yeah.
Like, the environments have so much character to them. I appreciate, like, the effort that goes into crafting something completely, you know, divorced from normal shooter, because it's like it's a shooter, but it's not like a shooter, like, you know, right? It's set in the world of a children's book, right?
Do you think it's a shooter at its core?
Well, the thing is, like, it's always described as a shooter, but really it's a third. It's really, I would say, to be honest, Alice is like 60% platforming, right?
It's a third-person action-adventure game.
Yeah, basically. But I think people described it as a shooter then because we didn't have like a lot of other examples, games like that, or hybrid games like that. But it is like, I feel like the bulk of it is taken up with platforming, and I think that's the reason why the combat isn't as good and the level design is better because the new level design. I mean, obviously, level design involves combat, right? Good level design involves creating good combat spaces, but it feels like that they were focused on platforming.
Which and maybe I'm being too harsh, but I just do not understand the Naughty's game obsession with parkour that is so unnecessary and not realized very well. Like the mechanics of, jumping and grabbing onto ledges and mantling over things. And
It's funny actually because Tomb Raider's fine, right, in general, but then Tomb Raider, and that was 95, right? But then it's a much slower paced game. It's more methodical in the way that you do jumps and whatever.
Are you referring to the PS1 Tomb Raider?
Yeah, and it was also PC as well. Yeah. But I guess there's this point where they're bridging the gap between the whole mantling over objects and all of that, and slower paced platforming or the fast paced platforming of some of the older console games, right? Because we had the same problem in Thief, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say the Lost City.
It's also a problem of 3D being a new thing. But then again, I mean, really, when you look at Mario 64, they got it pretty good. But in Mario 64, they spent a year or something in what they call the Mario Garden. They were just prototyping the level mechanics, the level design of it. And they were prototyping the exact timings of a jump, the exact, latency between an input press and what happened on screen and the exact the timings of the second and third jump and the exact heights of things and the cadence of all of that, which is not most people weren't doing that at the time, but it is one of the reasons why Mario 64 succeeds so well. And it was also Mario 64 came out in 98, 7.
Yeah, and that exactly is my point as well. It's just
3-4 years.
I really don't see any effort put into the realization of some of the mechanics that end up being a huge part of what this game is, like ledge grabbing. And
I wonder what was the point in which that sort of became better? Was it one of the Splinter Cell games, maybe, possibly? Maybe it's towards the end of the 2000s.
Perhaps. I guess we'll find out eventually on this show.
We just keep going through the years.
We just keep going until it gets good.
I mean, The Witcher 1 didn't even have any jumping.
It didn't, no. It didn't need it, to be honest.
No, but if you look, I mean, I guess if you look at Dishonored.
I mean, Dishonored's great.
Mirror's Edge.
Yeah, Mirror's Edge is great, yeah.
They put a lot of effort into realizing the whole, the speed at which you're going and, how you're prompted to use button presses and how fluid the character is, and doesn't feel awkward, right? Because, there's it's funny how slow that climb up to the top is that Alice does in this game.
And you have to. And I felt like there was something about the input, you have to stop your input and then press again. It was just so. It just felt so.
To go up, right? Yeah.
Yes. It just felt so.
It's why did you even bother putting that? It does almost feel like, why did they bother putting that in the first place? I guess it gets around level objects that are slightly too high to be jumped up, or don't have enough of a run up to jump onto them.
And you can't put blue mushrooms everywhere.
There was I've forgotten about those because you don't really see them so much in later levels, but I'd forgotten about those because they really make it go really high.
Did you mention that it was Vanya's favorite game?
Yes, I did.
Did you discuss it at all as you were playing it?
She was watching me play it the whole time, actually.
And how was it in the moments where you were getting frustrated with the game?
It was all right. I mean, she's just fairly sympathetic. I mean, I would say things like the stuff we've just talked about, right? About the combat. And she might say something like, "Oh yeah, but you were too close or whatever." All right. Because because it's her favorite game, she wanted to watch me play it. Because it came at a time when I guess we have games of our youth, right? It was at an age where it's quite special. And it's also quite different, and it's it's a female protagonist as well, and it's it's got music by a guy from Nine Inch Nails. It's got a cool theme to it. It looks really different than everything else at the time. Quite colourful, reasonably.
Yeah, no, I thought visual style was quite entertaining, and the music, it worked well with the visual style of it, I thought. How would you, to sum it all up, how would you rate it in accordance to other games?
What are we looking at here? Like,
I mean, so
what
far
we-
everything's in B, which is maybe it's our problems and we're just failing. Thief, Witcher, and Max Payne end up in B. We agreed that Max Payne is B tier, yeah? Oh, sorry, we agreed that Thief was B tier, yeah? On Max Payne,
Yeah, I think so.
we didn't agree, but on Max Payne and The Witcher, one of us said A and the other one said C, and so we ended up with B. So what would you say with Alice?
Oh God. What? Remind me of the tiers. Are we going? Is the S tier is the highest?
Yes.
Or S, A, B, C, D.
Yes.
It's not S.
No, it's really not.
I know I'll get dirty looks for that. I would say, oh God, I'm going to say B again, aren't I? Like, this is like super middle of the road B.
But
Because the problem is, like, it's split. My opinion is split on because there are aspects of it. The combat I don't think is particularly good. Right?
no.
It has interesting weapons, but like a lot of the game, it has interesting art, and in the same way that the game has an interesting art style, and it has good level design, and it looks cool. Like, it actually holds up as well, by the way. Like, I think the art holds up today, because some games really don't. But yeah, the combat brings it down a lot. But
Yeah.
I can't give it a C or a D. I can't give it a D for sure. I can't really give it a C either. And I guess I'm also thinking about this in the context of the time rather than
The
now.
time, yeah.
It'd be funny. Like, I wonder. I mean, maybe we've talked about this before. I can't remember, but like, I wonder if somebody released Alice now, like the
Yeah.
same game as it is right now.
Yes, modern graphics.
No, like the same.
The same.
Because perhaps with modern graphics, but there's so many games now that get released, like indie games that are doing the whole retro thing, like the whole boomer shooter.
I mean, I think, released now, it plays awfully.
Like, if you think about Dusk, right? If you've ever played Dusk is a indie game that is built in the style of like Quake, old games like that, like Quake 1, and it's sort of made with those mechanics in mind. But I wonder if I don't think it would. I think there'd be a lot of problems with Alice if it came out now. I think it'd be like, like release it on Steam in early access or something. Like,
If you fix the responsiveness of the controls and if you fix the combat, then I would consider that. But I think if you just release it as is now, I think there's no substance for people to play it, to be honest.
whereas I actually think if you released Max Payne now, it would do better.
Which they will. Max Payne remake.
But that's because it's being remastered, right?
It's been remade, I think.
Or the remake, yeah, and people know it already. I mean, like, if you never knew of it. So I'm gonna stick with C. Sorry,
With C.
B. Sorry, Jesus, B.
I feel like the games that we've played so far, being Thief, Max Payne, The Witcher, and Alice, if you release them now as is, they're not going to be successful because of some of the fundamental gameplay problems. Just because the bar is so much higher for these things like combat, for these things like what controls are supposed to feel like, and the responsiveness and how tight things are.
Like expected features.
But okay, and so when you say B, where would you put it amongst the other three?
I would put it a bit lower than Max Payne, which I think I did, because I think I gave out Max Payne A, I think.
You did give Max Payne A, and I said C, and we ended up with B. Okay.
I would maybe put it in the same league as Thief, though, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit. I wish I'd played the entire game because I feel like I'm judging it on an incomplete experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The combat
makes-
won't change, and if anything, I think the boss fights are the ones that really will frustrate you. But the other stuff, I mean, some of the other levels and stuff are kind of interesting. Maybe some of the level design later on might have.
Yeah, and I've seen these things further down the line where like you get turned into a chess piece,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and that felt like pretty interesting, and it seemed
Yeah.
like there are certain like traps and LD puzzles associated with it, which is quite cool.
Yeah, you have to make the moves that the chess piece would make in order to cross the board, right? So if you're a bishop, you always go, you go diagonally, right? And if you're a knight, you do the whole like 2-3-1, 1-2, or the 2-1 move, right?
Yeah, which probably means that I can't give it C as well because it will be a bit unfair. So we'll have to go with B again. And I would agree that it would probably rate it above Max Payne relative to Thief or thereabouts. Okay, we need to find some. Well, okay, but I feel like the next game is gonna score higher. I have a good feeling about the next game.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, next game is going to be
Asterix and Obelix Double XL.
Asterix, no, Obelix, Double XL. A game I had actually never heard of before, but is apparently a classic. So, okay.
I'm glad that you're going into it with no expectation because I think that. And so I don't remember if there are any difficulty levels, but if there are, maybe not. But if there are, just play it on easy. Not because it's necessarily hard or anything like it, but because I remember it, and I haven't played it in a while, but I remember it being sort of similar to Wolfenstein 2014, where it's just a fun action game where you just have fun bringing down like hordes of enemies. Experience of it isn't gonna necessarily improve if you make it more challenging, because it's just about having fun plowing through Roman legions. I played that game a few times, and probably I've played it in the relatively recent history as well, so not just when it was relevant. And I remember it being fun.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll see what you will have to say.
Cool.
All right, good talk.
Well, thanks. Thanks for listening.
Subscribe. Give us a like, leave a comment if you want to influence what we play next.